other one, this is ring announcer Thomas Triber. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived for Inside Boxing Weekly. So here are your hosts, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, and Jeremiah Preisser on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
Welcome to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Weekly is brought to you by mybookie.ag. If you want to bet the college basketball games tonight or tomorrow, go to mybookie.ag. You can go through to gruelingtruth.net, click on the banner. It'll take you right there. We are also brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. You can find them on Facebook, or you can find Alex Ramos on Facebook also to get there. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my co-host. First up, Jeremiah Preisser.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be on. It feels like it's been a little while since we talked some boxing. Let's get it going, guys.
It's because it has been a little while. Next up, John Einreinhofer.
I'm ready to roll, and with that introduction, it's the next best thing to fighting on show boxing. We don't have to take any punches, so.
Yeah, and we want to thank Thomas Triber out there for doing the introduction for our show. And Thomas will be on, I think, the April the 15th before he goes over to the UK for the Frampton Donaire fight. So he'll be with us then, so you can keep an eye out for us there. We're going to start off with the one fight. We're going to preview Browne-Whyte against Lucas Browne. Both of them weighed in, let's say, a little bit heavy. When we look at this fight, Browne-Whyte is a guy that is still probably most famous for his lone career loss coming in late 2015 to Anthony Joshua. 28-year-old heavyweight has become a contender of some note, winning 6 straight fights, including a dramatic slugfest in 2016 with Derek Chisora. And most recently, a dominant decision over a, let's call him disinterested, Robert Helenius. Lucas Browne is a guy that started boxing right before he was 30, I believe it was. He's 6'5", 38 years old now. Beat an older Ruslan Chagayev and, of course, James Toney. When you look at this fight, John, what do you think is going to happen?
I had to think about this one for a while, Mike, to actually think of how it would play out. And I finally came to the conclusion, after thinking about it long enough, that Browne-Whyte probably should be able to get a later stoppage in this fight. But let me qualify that, where I do like this fight in terms of I like fun heavyweight fights like most people. I'm in favor of that. I think it's a good thing. I think we probably should even have more of those. Even though it's heavyweights, you always also have the potential of a dud. And I think this is one. I'm glad HBO picked it up in the U.S. I'm going to be watching it. But with all that said, I think some people are kind of taking this fight the wrong way. Neither of these guys is going anywhere. And I'm going to say that. I don't care who wins tomorrow, what they do. Browne-Whyte's not going anywhere. Lucas Browne's 38 years old. He's not going anywhere. You just watch. I thought you gave him a generous introduction, Mike, because you just watch White. He's not good. He's really not that good. He hasn't beaten anybody. Derek Chisora, so what? Robert Helenius, who'd already got knocked out by Duhapa. Nobody's clamoring to see more of Duhapa. I just don't think either of these guys is that good. I think it's just a testament to the lack of depth in the heavyweight division. So I think people really need to take this fight in perspective. Had to think about it for a while just because of Browne's win over Chagayev, who actually is, or was, I should say, a legitimate top 10 fighter. That's what sort of provides the confusion in analyzing this. But, Browne tested positive for PEDs after the fight. So that victory was certainly tainted. And that's all he's got. You look at his resume, I mean, he's got nothing on there. His resume is even worse than White's. So when you look at that with the PEDs, he's 38. He hasn't been active since, particularly. He hasn't fought anybody since. And that was enough to have me give the nod to White, though. Again, I think it is going to be a fun type of fight. Could be some action, probably be relatively exciting as it goes on, but not at a particularly high skill level. And I think White will probably come out on top. But make no mistake, this guy's going nowhere. Deontay Wilder would annihilate him. He better hope that Hearn doesn't, except for the payday, that Hearn doesn't push him somehow into Wilder, because that'll be ugly.
Yeah, Wilder's a legend. Jeremiah, what's your take on this fight? Do you agree with John?
Yeah, well, I do agree with his conclusion. I do think that ultimately Dillian Whyte will score a late round stoppage. But of course, as he also alluded to, it is a tough one to analyze because Whyte, to me, is the bigger puncher. He's a plotter. Technically he's not great, but to me, some of his punches, especially the right hand, are a little sharper than Dillian Whyte's. Dillian Whyte is a good body puncher for a heavyweight. He's not great, but what I think is, Whyte is good early on, and I think if Whyte is going to win the fight, it's going to be early. So I think we look at Dillian Whyte's previous fights, and we talk about the Derek Chisora performance. If I'm not mistaken, he was hurting against Derek Chisora, and I'm not even convinced that he won the fight. I mean, it was certainly very close. So I think if Whyte being 38 years old, again bigger puncher, his chances are early. I think if he wins, which is a good chance. I mean, I'd say this fight's about 65, 35 in favor of Whyte, though it might be a little bit closer. Again, he'll get him out early. Whyte, to me, however, I think has just enough savvy to get into the late rounds. I think he has just enough power to stop Whyte, especially if he sticks to the body punching, which I'm hoping that he will. But it's a close one. I mean, I don't really know, who to go with in this one. But, yeah, again, I think it's Whyte's fight. He's talking about the Wilder fight as well, John is. And, I do think that that's a fight that's going to be lined up because Whyte in his last fight fought for some vacant WBC gold, orange, multicolored trinket. I don't know what the hell it was. But what it was is it was a way to set Whyte up for Deontay Wilder. And I know we've talked about in the past in previous shows that what I think Hearn wants to do is he wants to have Joshua and Wilder on the same card together, preferably in the UK later this year. And I think this is ultimately what would set it up, is that, Joshua, if he gets by Parker, I'm not exactly sure who he's going to fight, though, with Povetkin on the undercard fighting David Price, that might be what we're getting. Again, I wouldn't mind that at all, but I think that that's what they're doing. They're maneuvering Whyte into that position. He's, again, he holds some vague, outside WBC trinket, setting him up for, and I actually think that he's number one in the WBC's ranking. So that's what I think is going to happen. Whyte is going to get the Wilder fight later this year.
Well, I think the biggest point of this fight is you talk about the Chigaev win, John, but that was in March of 2016. And the last time he fought was June of 17 against a journeyman, Matthew Greer, who he knocked out in the second round. And I don't really think it's a good idea for a 38-year-old to be taken off a year and a half, or really considering that's not really any competition. He hasn't fought in 2 years going into this fight.
Well, I agree with you, Mike. I think that's a very important point that means a lot here, and I think that's one of the reasons he's in with Whyte, because I think Eddie Hearn is well aware. I think Hearn's got good judgment in this sense. I think he's well aware of who Whyte can beat and who he can't beat. And he figures Lucas Browne in this situation is a guy he can beat, who just has a little bit of notoriety because of the Chigaev win. And I think with PEDs being such a big issue in boxing, this distinction's starting to be made. And there's something to it because, of course, the danger is even higher. Remember, Browne tested positive for in-competition PEDs. So in other words, what we're saying with guys like Browne is when he was, knocking Chigaev senseless, he was on PEDs. Okay. So, we're not speculating about it was way out before the fight or for whatever reason he was using it. He came up positive in competition. In other words, in the fight, he was on the, under the influence of PEDs, so to speak, getting the benefit of PEDs. So let's presume that if, I don't know frankly, what the exact testing situation is for this fight, but the WBC, with their silver trinket that Jeremiah alluded to, they supposedly have the VADA testing as part of their clean boxing program, even though the WBC follows the results of those tests when they feel like it, and then when they don't feel like it, they don't follow them. But assuming that the clean boxing program, so to speak, is in effect for this fight, which, since it's supposedly a WBC silver heavyweight title fight, as much as it pains me to say that, it should be VADA tested, which means what I'm getting to with all this is that Browne will not be under the influence of PEDs in the competition, we assume here. And at 38 years old, with the inactivity you talked about, this guy could come into the ring with nothing if the PED use benefited him that significantly, which who knows, it might have.
Well, I think I think that there's a good case to be made from watching these guys that they're coming in with nothing either way. I mean,
no argument there.
When I look at this fight, I could see either one of them winning it, just because. Number one, we don't know if Lucas Browne's any good or not, but I can guess just from looking at him that he's probably not, because if he was, a 75-year-old James Toney, he'd have been able to deal with a little bit better. And the thing that drives me nuts is I see all these people yell, but James Toney, even at that age, has so much boxing ability and boxing smarts. No, he's like 50 years old.
Not at 50, though.
Yeah, he's like 50 years old. Come on.
Not when he's a 50-year-old middleweight.
If that was true, John, then Muhammad Ali would have gave Larry Holmes a tussle when he was only 38, because he had as much boxing knowledge as anybody. So,
Mike, at least Muhammad Ali didn't start out as a middleweight, at least. James Toney started out as a middleweight. So as a 50-year-old,
in the amateurs, I think he won a gold medal at middleweight.
Ali was light heavyweight in the amateurs.
Yeah, but before that, he started off as a middleweight because he won a or an American championship there. But it's not the same thing. And the fact that we have brought Muhammad Ali up while talking about White and Browne makes me feel sad. Maybe we should have just brought up Pablo Baez.
Dillian Whyte is very close to the Pablo Baez of the heavyweights of this generation.
Well, yeah. And the funny thing is, Dillian Whyte, as I referenced just before, he almost lost to Derek Chisora, who is probably even more like the Pablo Baez of the heavyweight division. Chisora's been past it for years and years now. And again, anybody watch that fight? I know a lot of people who actually thought Chisora won. It was not a convincing victory by any means. And Chisora is a guy that I like. I do want to preface by saying that, because he is a guy who will get in there with anybody, and he'll be competitive with most guys. But that's the thing is, and that's one thing, we're talking about these guys' skill level and whatnot. But as John said, and as we're all saying, it is a fun fight, right? That mystery surrounding it.
I don't think it is. I think there's some mystery, but I don't see how this is going to be a fun fight. When the two guys weigh in needing brawls, they definitely didn't take this seriously because they're both overweight. They were always overweight.
They're serious.
But they're even more overweight now. So I think what you get is this. You might get a 2 or 3 rounds firework where it's a knockout and it's a good fight. But I think that there is a predominant cloud over this fight that tells me that this is going to be 12 rounds of 2 big fat men hugging each other.
I'll give it the fun fight thing. I think it might be 2 fat men floundering around with excitement, rocking each other with big shots, and that's what I'm hoping for.
Oh my God, that's what we're hoping for. What's this world come to?
Yeah,
look at the same thing I'm hoping for too, though, John. So I know what you're saying.
I know. We might.
With the state of the heavyweight division, this is how low it's gotten. This is what we have to expect. We have to expect at least, whether it's sloppy or not, a knockout.
Yeah, but this is the only reason it's a big fight is because they want White to win a fight that will give him some excuse for fighting Deontay Wilder. And I can also tell you this: you brought up Alexander Povetkin. I would be willing to bet that Alexander Povetkin doesn't get near Wilder or Joshua until after they've had their fight.
I think he might get I agree with Jeremiah. I think there's a good chance he does get Joshua if Hearn wants to hold it off. But what I wish would happen here, to at least kind of not waste our time, and it could easily be set up, is if we're going to show White on HBO at 6 o'clock on Saturday night in a potentially fun fight, that he is a favorite to win. I think he was a minus 245 the last time I checked. So he's not a big favorite, but he's a favorite. Why don't we let Jarrell Miller bludgeon him into submission after this fight, since they're both with Hearn, instead of the Wilder fight, which we don't need, and Wilder's going to annihilate him. Let it just be like a step-up fight, if we can even call it that, for Jarrell Miller. But Jarrell Miller hasn't fought any younger guys, so I think that's where it could be of some use. And White, even for me, the division is so thin. He's top 10 at the fringe of the top 10, just in there now. So why not have that? HBO could put that on in the fall.
That's a waste of time too. If you're going to do this, I would rather see Jarrell Miller fight Joshua or Wilder, and Povetkin fight the other one, and then the two winners fight, and we have a heavyweight champion.
I wouldn't mind that, but I think that Hearn is probably a little biased towards the British boys here, and so I don't think he's going to let White off without a payday.
Oh yeah, he will.
Yeah, I agree with Jeremiah, and I don't think that. I think that Hearn, like I said, I think he's a pretty smart guy. Shows to me a pretty good knack for evaluating talent with where he wants to put his guys, and I still submit that no matter what he says, and even though Joshua would be the favorite, Jarrell Miller is too much of an X factor to risk Anthony Joshua in with before the Wilder fight. And I don't think Hearn will do that.
Yeah, so that's why I don't. And they're not going to risk it with Wilder fighting either one of them either, because that would be stupid.
Now, Povetkin's 37 years old. He's off the PEDs, and Wilder already tried to fight him once, and he PED'd out. So, Wilder's already shown a willingness to take the guy on. And that was a couple of years ago, and
he should have fought him then instead of worrying about the PEDs.
Well, I think he was, within his rights to do that. I'm not going to blame him for that, but I think that, at this point, I think Povetkin's fighting in Great Britain for a reason, like, Jeremiah is looking at, and Hearn might look at the age there and think, he'll probably look and see how Joshua looks against Price, if you can tell anything by that.
No.
Povetkin looks against Price. And, I could maybe see that. I've advocated all year. I want to see him get right to Wilder, Joshua. I hope that is what happens, but I don't know which way Hearn's going to go with that yet.
Well, I can tell you this. I would say this. If I'm Alexander Povetkin, I would try to hold David Price up for about 8 rounds before knocking him out.
And he could probably do that. I mean, Price is a good fighter.
I don't know, because I don't know if Price can stand up for 8 3-minute rounds.
Right, yeah. I mean, after he's like most heavyweight fighters, even Anthony Joshua. I mean, after about four rounds, he's blown out of his ass.
But the difference between Joshua and Wilder is they have shown some capacity to rebound from being tired. David Price, when he gets tired, he's pretty much done.
Yeah, well, and I think, naturally you kind of that's what you expect from a guy so damn big. But yeah, I mean, Povetkin could carry him late and I think get him out of there if he wants to. I mean, you saw Price's fights against Thompson and Erkin Tepper. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how he looked. He was about gone. But I mean, does Povetkin get to fight against Joshua? I think so, but I wouldn't be surprised if, Kubrat Pulev is still probably highly ranked by some, stupid alphabet soup organization.
He's not as dangerous.
Yeah, no, exactly. Right, exactly. Pulev is not the puncher that Povetkin is. I think you both are right in the sense that Miller is kind of one of those guys who's just going to have to wait his turn. I think they just kind of want him to prove a little bit more before he gets in there. In Povetkin's situation, I don't know. It could be Pulev, but either way, again, I don't think, Mike, you or I are all that bothered by the prospect of, Joshua versus Povetkin, and then on the same card, Wilder versus White, and then they fight early next year. I'm not too bothered by it. I just don't think that, again, a guy like Jarrell Miller is going to get a shot anytime soon.
No, and like I said, I think if I'm Hearn, I keep him away from Povetkin and Miller. I keep both of those guys away from him because those are the two guys that, number one, we know Povetkin in his prime was better than these two guys. The problem is we don't know how far past that prime he is. And with Miller, you see a lot of talent there, but there's a lot of questions. But those questions are what would make me fear putting him in against either one of those guys.
Yeah,
I think Joshua and Wilder are better than Povetkin. I think they'll prove to be better. Povetkin flopped against Klitschko. Klitschko proved to be a great fighter, but
he was a great fighter.
He didn't. But Povetkin didn't show any grit in that fight, and he didn't show any kind of real willingness to do what it takes to win. And he's tested twice for the PEDs. We know the history of the Russians in general. He was good enough on the PEDs to beat the other guys in this era, but what was the era outside of the Klitschkos?
Well, I mean, that brings us to Canelo Alvarez, which you talk about Russians, you might as well talk about Mexicans testing positive for PEDs. And the thing that struck me about this, Jeremiah, we talked about this last night, was the fact that this was all going away until somebody stuck a microphone in front of Triple G.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. It felt like the whole situation was starting to fade away. I wasn't hearing as much about it in the press, and whether that was deliberate or not, maybe people were waiting. They were trying to find some answers, see if Canelo would go before the Nevada State Athletic Commission and give his testimony, and they maybe would be able to sort through the details. But funny enough, I had heard that Alvarez had already talked to the Nevada State Athletic Commission and given them his side of the story, but I guess Eric Gomez and others are saying that he has no problem going back. I don't remember hearing anything about that. So, yeah, but it does feel like that. It felt like it was starting to fade away. And then they stuck a mic in Golovkin's face in training camp because at the moment, Canelo Alvarez and his people are not letting people in his camp. I mean, nobody is sticking a mic in his face. It doesn't seem like they want to talk about the issue. They don't want to talk about any of the issues that have been brought up lately. But I have heard that that eventually they'll probably let the high level Mexican media eventually get in there. But yeah, Golovkin seems, and we were talking about this. Michael Montero talked about this. What it seems like, and again, I'm probably summarizing what Abel Sanchez said here. Golovkin was ignorant of the way of the game initially. He didn't think in the first fight that in front of so many people that he could get a bogus scorecard or that they could take a victory away from him. And then you get the scorecard by Bird that just about everybody and their grandmother disagrees with. And then come the second fight, right? He tests positive for clenbuterol. You look at the hand wrapping situation. Maybe that's late. I don't know as much about the hand wrapping situation as others, but what Michael Montero did say was that in the Erislandy-Lara fight, Alvarez was allowed to wrap his hands the way that Abel Sanchez accused him of doing so before the Golovkin fight. And then when Erislandy-Lara was going to wrap his hands like that, the Nevada State Athletic Commission told him that he could not do that. So what I think is Golovkin is starting to put the pieces together about how the state of corruption in boxing itself, and he's upset by it. And I think rightfully so. I mean, is he going a little overboard with some of the accusations? Maybe he is. I mean, I don't know about the pills. I don't know about injections. I don't know about any of that stuff. But again, I think he's starting to learn that boxing is, it's all of this is deeply rooted in the game, and there's no doubt about it that Alvarez has been receiving a helping hand his entire life. I mean, I wrote an article about how ever since the Larry Mosley fight, which is a damn close fight, by the way, he's been getting generous scorecards. I mean, you can't even deny it. Look at the scorecards with Lara. Look at the score with Mayweather. I mean, how do you get a draw out of that fight when Mayweather won pretty much every single round there? So yeah, I think Golovkin has awoken to all this, and I think he's upset by it.
All right, John.
Yeah, I don't buy any of these Canelo conspiracy theories or Golden Boy conspiracy theories. I've been fair, I believe. I said, when the story first broke and read the reports, not the Golden Boy report, read, Dr. Goodman's letter about Canelo's positive test. And even though up to this point, I've liked the way he's conducted himself and his career for the most part, and liked his abilities as a fighter. I said, and I still say, as of today, is it likely that he took the clenbuterol and did this? I mean, it's an asthma medication. It's like Povetkin taking the melodeon for open heart recovery. You get this stuff from doctors. I think he did it. I mean, but I think the way this should work is the presumption is against him when he tests positive, which there's no dispute he tested positive, but there's also no dispute that the report of the positive test did say that it is within the limits of meat contamination. Again, I would think it's more likely that he probably took it intentionally, but it is not being biased in favor of Canelo to say it is conceivable he got it through meat contamination. But I think the burden should now be on him. I think the burden shifts to him, and I think what the appropriate standard would be for that would be like the civil legal standard, which people who ultimately do this stuff are going to be familiar with that type of thing. He has to prove it's more likely than not that he did not take the clenbuterol intentionally. And I think that there are, the way boxing is, without conspiracy theories, I think that there's some legitimate problems here, because it's the WBC, as part of their clean boxing program, which we know they don't administer it consistently, but which would be one of the only good things that the WBC has ever done. And I've said that for the last year or so, even though I can't stand the WBC. But here's the problem. The testing is admitted by the WBC, not the Nevada State Athletic Commission. That's not part of Nevada or any other state standards yet, where they're giving these guys at a competition consistent VADA testing, okay? So the commission is getting informed of the positive test, but now they have to step in when it's not even their testing, and they've got to come up with a procedure to investigate, what Canelo Alvarez did or didn't do. And they should do that. And the procedure should be that Canelo's got to produce receipts from evidence that he bought the meat in his home area in Mexico, what date it was, or again, and you don't have to take this as gospel if he provides this, but, or affidavits of people who said they ate the meat with them. And then when you're investigating, you can see what the credibility of these people are and things like that, which of course takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money. But I don't buy these black helicopter conspiracy theories about Canelo's whole career and things like that. I think that's absolute nonsense. I think my take on Golovkin was, I'm sympathetic with him when Canelo got this first positive test. Then he's got to make his own decision, like Deontay Wilder had to do with Povetkin. Do I want to fight this guy now, or do I not want to fight this guy now? Certainly Povetkin, who tested positive multiple times and is part of the Russian system, was part of the Russian amateur program when they got banned for the Olympics, had a much bigger black cloud over him and probably shouldn't even be fighting, as compared to Canelo Alvarez, which this is the first time he's actually tested positive. But again, my standard, I believe, if he did in fact test positive and he can't now meet his burden of proof, he should be suspended. I would say for first test, it's got to be at least a year suspension. You should be out of the ratings or lose your championship. Second suspension should be anything from, we've got to get a consensus. You don't fight anymore till you're out for over 2 years out of the rankings, something like that, maybe 3 years, something very severe. But I don't buy all the conspiracy theories. I think now, just on this most recent part, Golovkin's talking too much. I think Golovkin took a lot of shots in the first fight. I think he's used to being the big bully. He couldn't bully Canelo. I think, of course, Canelo should not do it a crooked way, being in better shape for the second fight through PEDs. I don't condone that. But I think there's probably fear that Canelo's younger. He put a lot of damage to the body on Golovkin in the first fight, a lot of headshots. I thought he won the fight. I don't think a draw was out of line. Golovkin's not going to come in and be the boss in this fight and bully this guy around. I think Canelo would have beaten him without PEDs, but, PEDs give him an unfair advantage. That's wrong. And, Golovkin's got to make that decision. I would not blame Golovkin if he said the guy tested positive for PEDs. I don't want to fight him. I wouldn't criticize him. I wouldn't say he's doing anything wrong, but I don't buy all the conspiracy theory stuff. And I think the burden of proof's on Canelo. He's got to show now that he can do it.
What's the conspiracy theory stuff on the judges' scorecards?
Judges' scorecards, needle
marks. You think those were legit?
Well, I didn't agree with the cards, but you've got to show me what was the benefit of what decision was changed. I think that Canelo pulled out the fight against Lara. I thought he won the fight against Golovkin. If it was a draw, I don't think that was an outrageous decision whatsoever. I know Jeremiah had the fight 115-113 for Golovkin, so I don't see how changing one round makes it the worst decision of all time. I just don't. But when
you have somebody that scores the fight 10-2 in his favor, which is what I think Adelaide Byrd did, and then when you have somebody that scores a fight where he lost every round against Floyd Mayweather, I think they scored it a draw. And did you had? I mean, there's been at least 5 or 6 fights where there's a scorecard like that every time.
Mike, how many? You've watched boxing for a long time, as I have, as Jeremiah.
Yeah,
has.
so I know this stuff happens.
Yeah, but we see these bad scorecards all the time. In all kinds of minor fights, we see wacky scorecards. I saw a Showbox fight about 2 years ago where it literally looked like the judge and all we could conclude, in other words, Farhood and anybody watching the fight, was I think the guy literally got the fighters mixed up and scored the fight for the wrong guy because he got the fighters mixed up. He mistook which fighter was which. So, it's boxing, and it doesn't mean it's good, but, we've been seeing this stuff throughout boxing. And I think when you get into black helicopter conspiracy theories that you really don't have any evidence of, it's just too much. You just got to look at it one piece of evidence at a time. One piece of evidence we do have is Canelo Alvarez tested positive for clenbuterol.
Yeah, and this is not the first time that he's done this stuff.
Right. Well, and this is my thing is at what point do we stop chalking it up to, judging incompetence and see that the consistency to me is too much to say, hey, it just happens. I mean, when Alvarez fought Austin Trout, Stanley Chris duo had it 10-2 for Alvarez. I know a number of people like Cliff Rold, who scored that fight for Austin Trout. I mean, that was a real close fight. What was it against Lara? It was like somebody had it 9-3 or something in Alvarez's favor. The draw versus Floyd Mayweather, the wacky scorecard against Golovkin. For me, there's just too much there to consistently chalk it up to incompetence, especially at the world-class level. I mean, these judges are supposed to be the best of the best, yet somehow they find a way to disagree with 80-90% of the media. I mean, for me, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And we know that the cash cow almost always gets favorable decisions, favorable treatment. I mean, that's not conspiracy theory. I mean, it's been a consistency in the game for many, many years now.
Well, you look Pacquiao. Jeff Horn got the decision against Manny Pacquiao. Everybody, most people thought Pacquiao won the fight. So obviously Pacquiao brings in much more cash than Jeff Horn. Why did Jeff Horn get the decision?
No, he didn't. He doesn't, because Jeff Horn is young. They're fighting in Australia. He'll fight Terrence Crawford, where Pacquiao probably won't. They were cashing him out.
Well, but it's still Pacquiao still brings in much more dollars than Horn, and Arum, is obviously has made a lot more money off of Pacquiao. I mean, there's speculations on certain things how they might happen, but I didn't think. I mean, Canelo Alvarez dropped Austin Trout. I don't think that fight was particularly close.
Yeah, but
it wasn't 10-2.
You also are one of 3 people in the entire world that'll sit there and think that Canelo dominated Triple G. And the other thing I don't like is this:
I never said that Canelo Alvarez dominated Triple G.
He bullied him. He beat him around. I mean, he won the fight pretty easy, from what you said. I mean,
never said he won the fight pretty easy. I never said that. I just said
but the fact is this.
He won the fight, and I said Golovkin took a lot of shots. That's all.
The fact is this. Anybody that watched that fight that I respect outside of you has no doubt who won that fight. And the other thing is
You
this.
respect Roberto Duran.
No.
So Roberto Duran.
Why would I respect Roberto Duran's opinion about anything? I don't know him. He was a fighter. Yeah, come on. I don't respect what Charles Barkley says about basketball, do you?
A lot of times not. Sometimes yes.
Okay, but a lot of times not. And this is the thing. The only name you ever give me is Roberto Duran, and I don't know why I give a fuck what Roberto Duran scored in the fight. I don't know that because I didn't see him score it. I didn't talk to him about it. You just told me he did. I haven't seen anything reporting it. I'm not doubting you, but all I know is this. I watched that fight, and the clear winner was Triple G. And the other thing we know is this. If this was Anthony Joshua beating Deontay Wilder, and then the second time when they're getting ready to fight, he would have tested dirty, you would have assumed that the only reason Wilder lost the first time was he was dirty. This is what I'll assume. I'll assume this. With Canelo and the way he's put on weight, if he did this clenbuterol, and I think he did, evidence points that way, but I don't know that, but if he did this stuff, and I mean the acne on him and everything else through his career tells me he did, then he's been dirty this whole time. Because I don't think all of a sudden in the last 6 months he thought, oh, maybe I better take clenbuterol.
Well, and here's my thing too is with Mexican boxers.
But he was VADA tested for the first fight. That's the thing.
Yeah, he was VADA tested for the first fight. But if they cycled off, if he cycled off at the right time, he wouldn't have got caught, and he didn't. All his testing before was by USADA. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing is, we as much as I have respect for what VADA is doing, I mean, and they seem to be the only ones catching anybody. USADA isn't doing diddly squat, and we know they've, been embroiled in controversy with Eric Morales and again Winky Wright and Peter Quillen. We know stuff like that. But the thing about VADA is, as good as they are, we don't know what Canelo Alvarez or even Golovkin or the vast majority of these fighters. The only two fighters that I'm aware of who have done 365 24/7 VADA testing is Nonito Donaire and Edwin Rodriguez. Everybody else is suspicious in my opinion. But the thing about Alvarez is we don't know what he was doing after the first fight. He could have been, you saw the videos. He was still training. He was still in the gym after the first fight with Golovkin. He could have been juicing like a damn Minute Maid box, doing all sorts of crap, before and then cycled off, and then they started doing the testing. I mean, I don't think just because you're tested once by VADA. Not only that, Liam Smith and Canelo Alvarez were supposed to do VADA testing before their fight, and they just scrapped it. Alvarez and Mosley, I think, were supposed to do VADA testing, and I think that was scrapped as well. I mean, they didn't do any testing for the Cotto fight. I mean, is it any wonder? I mean, again, I'm not saying that Alvarez did do it, but there's a big gap in saying that, hey, they tested once, they're clean guys. I mean, the sport doesn't work like that. There are just too many times. There's just too much space in which a guy can use, and especially when we're talking about boxing, a sport where there are all sorts of guys with questionable morals. But what I was going to say is what you have is with clenbuterol and Mexican athletes is when the Mexican soccer team tested positive for clenbuterol and they all ate tainted meat, that's not a coincidence, right? They all tested positive. But the one thing about that is after that time, after they all tested positive, you haven't heard anything about that since, because the punishment, if you look at WADA protocol, there is no limit by which you're given to have clenbuterol in your system. Any positive test is a red flag, right? You look at and again, I know some of these examples don't apply to Canelo Alvarez. There's some differences here, but what I'm saying is WADA does not accept any level, unlike Meldonium, they don't accept any level of clenbuterol in their system to be okay. And not only that, again, you have the soccer teams that test positive, no positive tests after that. You had a golfer who was a Swiss guy. He tested positive, no positive tests after that. Well, look in boxing. You keep getting guys over and over again who keep making this excuse. And again, I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think it just happens to be boxers who are consuming tainted meat. You look at Francisco Vargas. Okay, I ate tainted meat. I ate tainted meat. Alvarez, tainted meat. I mean, you keep having boxers who keep using that excuse, and it's not because I think they're eating tainted meat. It's because I think they keep getting slaps on a wrist. Or look at Louis Neary. They keep getting slaps on the wrist by the WBC. That's exactly why we keep having these positive tests. It's not because they're just going out or they're going to a taco truck, at 2 a.m. with their buddies, and they're like, oh, well, I'm about to hit camp. Let's, I better, get some street tacos in my system before, this long road, I just don't think that. I just think it's because there's no uniformity in the way they're applying this.
Well, and this is the thing. This is why I don't really care about the steroid thing, because if you're not testing an athlete 12 months, every month, you don't know what they're doing, because most athletes, you're cycling on this stuff for 3 or 4 months. You cycle off 3 or 4 months. And I mean, there's no way, unless you're testing everybody on a monthly basis, that you're ever going to know who exactly is cheating and who's not.
Right.
Well, I basically agree with what you guys have said, except that I do think that, like, for the VADA testing for the first fight between Alvarez and Golovkin, I think it's good to at least keep the fighter off it potentially for competition.
But it
where
doesn't matter.
It's going to be at the most.
Wait a second, John, real quick, with football players, when you take steroids, I'm taking steroids when I'm lifting in February, March, April, May. I'm getting off of it June, July, August, September, but that competitive advantage is already there. And then
I get that, but it's not, it's not as bad. It's not as bad, though.
It's not as bad.
Yeah. No. I mean,
it's not
John,
as bad as if they go into the competition under the influence of the PED.
They're in the competition under the influence of it because of the advantage it gives them when they're doing it.
But they don't actually have it in. They don't actually have it in them when they are actually fighting.
All right.
And that's better than just
I'm not going to be able to explain this. So I can tell you this. I coach professional football players. It's in your system. Even if you don't test for it, the advantages are done 4 months out. They're not done going up into it. It may make a 20% difference, but the damage is already done. And the thing is this, when you want to sit there and constantly rip on Alexander Povetkin for melatonin is nowhere near the scale of clenbuterol. Not even close. Not for what it does for an athlete. Clenbuterol, the reason, as Jeremiah talked about, while there is nothing that's supposed to be in your system there, you fail to test. Melatonin, what it does for you as an athlete is nowhere near clenbuterol. And the fact that he had this in, the one thing I would like to know is this, and I would like to see the test come out, is how much was actually in his system. I would like to actually see that, because I'm betting it's more than what would be tainted meat. I'm saying this, when I see an athlete that has acne on their back, acne on their chest, you're 30 years old, you usually don't have that. And that's kind of a sign right there. And we've seen, like, Andrew Galata, everybody knew he was juicing. Hell, you could play tic-tac-toe on his back and his front side. And I'm just telling you this, John, clenbuterol is serious. And if you're taking it for half the year and not the other half, that effect you're having if you take clenbuterol for 4 months and you don't cycle off and use it for another 4 months, it's actually going to hurt your body. Because if you don't cycle off of steroids at the right time, I've had guys before that, played football for me that thought that it would be great to do it year-round, and a year and a half, 2 years later, they can barely walk. I mean, it's not a good thing to not cycle off. You have to cycle off for it to work. So, yeah, if they start taking it at the start of training camp and hadn't taken it for 6 months before, yeah, it will make more of a difference than if you did it the 4 months before. But what I'm saying is there's a lot of things in here that people are missing, and I think the biggest thing that's being missed is if people think this is the first time he ever did this, if it wasn't tainted meat. And even if it was tainted meat, he should be suspended for being a dumbass and eating meat in Mexico.
Just briefly, I'm not saying it's necessarily the first time he did it. I'm saying it's the first time he tested positive, and he did have VADA testing.
He'd never been tested except for that one time. My guess is this: if it's a low level, He just missed by a week when he should have cycled off.
I mean, it's possible, but it's certainly possible, and I think the burden's on him now. So I hopefully there will be some degree of an investigation.
Yeah, and I really don't think that this is something where Golovkin could get to choose whether he fights him or not. See, I think right there, that's your problem. I mean, Deontay Wilder shouldn't have had a choice whether he fought Povetkin or not. If you're going to take the test serious and somebody fails it, you can't fight. That's just the way it is. You can't. Because then you're just giving preferential treatment because he wants to make a lot of money, which is great. But if you're taking this serious and it gives somebody a competitive advantage, I don't know why Golovkin would even be allowed to say, hey, I want to fight or I don't want to fight.
I agree with that. I'm actually okay with that.
Yeah, and I would just add real quick that, and this was on to John's point earlier about how they're doing, if they do the investigation, if they do a proper investigation, and I know there's not much of a precedence for it, but maybe they could take a hair follicle from Canelo Alvarez's head, test it. From what I've heard, that sort of thing will see how long it had been in your system. I guess it just retains it longer than your urine or your blood. So, maybe they can do that. Maybe we get to the bottom of it.
Well, I've watched boxing long enough to know that black helicopters do exist in boxing. They may not in real life as much, but I don't think they would ever do that and risk finding out something adverse. It would really surprise me if we get a investigation that's real here. Now, if it was on the other side and it was Golovkin, I still don't think you'd get a real investigation. So I'm not saying it's preferential treatment there. I just think Oscar De La Hoya, Golden Boy, and the Nevada State Athletic Commission want to get paid.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, that's where there's some natural bias there. The only hope I see, though, still is because they could be subject to other types of investigations and things like that, would be these big state athletic commissions like New York, Nevada, and they've all had problems. I understand that. I know the history of the problems, but unfortunately, I think it's the best we've got. And they're probably going to have to do it or nothing's going to happen.
Well, nothing's going to happen because it costs them money, too. I mean, it's just, I don't think anything will happen from it. It should. But what we will get is a pissed-off Triple G against a pissed-off Canelo, so maybe we'll get a really good fight.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're going to get lower pay-per-view numbers, to tell you the truth.
I think this makes it bigger. I think this makes it a lot bigger. People, remember, we just got done with a presidential election that went into the sewer. We've got reality TV, which is basically in the sewer. People love, as Michael Montero would say, a shit show. You had Mayweather and McGregor. That was a shit show. So what you'll have is these guys will start talking shit to each other. The fight will be even bigger than what it was. I really think that it will. I think that you are selling the American public way too high by saying that they would be not in for going down in the gutter for this.
I just got a feeling that, boxing relies on the boxing fan so much when you look at what the numbers and what the usual ceilings are. I have a feeling that it turns off enough boxing fans who saw this once, even though I liked the fight and it was a good fight. I don't like what's happened now. I just think it's going to turn off enough people that they're not going to break out the checkbook for this one.
Man, I'll tell you what, if you're going to turn off boxing fans, they'd have been turned off a long time ago from the shit that we've been through.
Yeah, we're masochists.
I'm going to say, like just so you know where I'm talking about, I'll make a prediction now, and maybe I'll be wrong as we get closer to the fight. I think the last one was 1.5 and or 1.3 to 1.5, which was of course a big moneymaker, but not for the best fight that could be made in boxing, not that what you would have hoped. And I think maybe 900,000.
On what, pay-per-view buys?
Yeah, pay-per-view buys.
I think they'd live with that at $70 a pop.
And right, and I think that's why, as you're saying, and you're probably right there, the financial incentive, the show will go on.
Yeah, and they'll just make this a bigger show. I mean, Mayweather-McGregor was a more disgusting matchup than this, even if both guys run steroids.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, and a lot of people bought that. The West Virginia Mountaineers are getting ready to lose to Villanova, so I know we got to be getting off here because John wants to go watch his team lose. the way I watched.
No, I'm predicting the upset here, but I predicted it before the tournament, so I'm staying with it.
You predicted them last year to beat Gonzaga in the Sweet 16 too, and that didn't work out too good.
Came very close, and my Final Four is my Final Four. Go listen to our NCAA tournament preview show because I'm looking pretty good right now. I just need to get this one here.
What did you have in the Final Four? I was there, and I don't remember.
I'll tell the bad first, of course, just to be completely honest. I had Virginia, like a lot of people, but I had Purdue, I had Kansas, and Purdue, Kansas, and who was now it's
I don't know. I had Villanova to win it all, so
I had it'll come. Oh, Purdue, Kansas, and I got Michigan to win it all. So
yeah, but problem with that is
three out of four.
Purdue and Kansas will both lose tonight, so.
That's what we're going to find out very shortly.
I think they will, especially Kansas. I really like Clemson. All right, guys, we're going to wrap this up because I know nobody listening in England, and if it's live, it's like 1 in the morning, gives a two shits about the NCAA basketball tournament, so I apologize to Bob Day for bringing that up. I want to remind everybody, if you go check out the Grueling Truth Legend show, this past week we had Randy Shields on, which was very interesting, a lot of interesting comments, especially about Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns. So if you're into boxing from the 70s and 80s, especially those guys, I'd really suggest you go listen to that. Over this weekend, you will hear me and Christopher Shelton talk about the 1980 Olympic boxing team, plus the 1980 Olympic boycott and the tragic plane crash in Poland in 1980. I think that's about it. Remember, you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you hear sports podcasts, you'll find the Grueling Truth. So for John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to the Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.